last topic in Unit 3 is about the demographic transition model. And the demographic transition model is an idea that was developed in the 1930s through 50s. And it is a tool or a model that predicts how birth and death rates change over time as societies gain technology, education, and economic development. It's typically split up into 4 or sometimes 5 stages. And the demographic transition model predicts or explains the shift from high birth and death rates in pre-industrial communities to low birth and death rates in industrialized, more developed economies. And so we can look at the demographic transition model here. This shows us the core of it is this graph that we see. We have different stages of the demographic transition on the bottom. Sometimes there's not a fifth, sometimes it's just 4. We have birth and death rates are the y-axis. And then we have usually 3 separate lines. One line, this green line, represents the birth rate. The purple line here in this graph represents the death rate. And then there's often a graph showing the total population size. And so if we think through this demographic transition, we can understand why the birth and death rates change in these ways. So in stage 1, we would consider this pre-industrialization. And so basically all of the world was in stage 1 up until late in the 18th century. There were generally high birth rates and high death rates. Okay, this is at a time when there may be food scarcity. There's poor sanitation, and there is poor medical treatment, etc. So when you have high birth and death rates, you have relatively low population growth, okay, because they are somewhat balanced. If we think about what a population pyramid fitting stage 1 would look something like this, where you have a relatively wide on the bottom, but scooping in here in this concave manner, representing this high death rate. As countries obtain better nutrition, technology, as economies start to develop, then we see shifts into stage 2. In stage 2, typically the birth rate stays high, but because of better access to food, because of better health care, what we see is the death rate starting to decline pretty drastically during stage 2. So birth rate remains high, death rate drops rapidly, and because of this wide gap here between birth rate, which is much higher than death rate, what we see is rapid population growth here. And the line indicating the total population shows that during stage 2 we have this rapid population growth. If we're thinking about the population pyramid that represents that, it's that pyramid shape, very rapid increase that's typical of this pyramid shape. As we shift into stage 3, as countries continue on this line of economic development, we then see birth rates start to decline as we reach stage 3. This could be due to several reasons. One might be better access to family planning and contraception. It could be due to more educational opportunities for women in these areas. It could be due to the delay of first marriage or childbirth. These things tend to decrease the birth rate. So as we start to reach into stage 3, the birth rate falls, and therefore the rate of population growth starts to level off because birth rate is falling, death rate has been reduced previously. And then when we look at the population pyramid, what we see is sort of a column shape. So as we look, we have this sort of column shape towards the bottom representing a slowing population growth. When we reach the post-industrialized economic development, what we see is that birth rates have fallen to basically balance out death rates. And that leads to both a low birth rate, low death rate. Again, they're somewhat imbalanced, leading to the leveling off of population growth here in stage 4. And then sometimes people split out stage 5, a post-industrialization, where we sometimes see a declining population if birth rates drop below death rates. But that's in some models, but not in others. And so what we can see is that this demographic transition model sort of provides these trends. Here's some actual data. This is in Britain from the 1700s on, and we can see some estimates, but then some actual data here that show us this demographic transition and how it took place in Britain. And again, we see time on the x-axis. We can see stage 1 of the demographic transition here in the late 1700s, where we have high birth and death rates. Then we see stage 2, we have the falling death rate, but a high birth rate. Stage 3, the birth rate drops, coming close to the death rate, and then they're relatively balanced hereafter. You can see there's little blips for, post-war baby boom in World War I and II, etc. But we can see this data shows us the changes over time. And this is the shift from an agricultural-based subsistence farming to industrialized, more urbanized way of living. Stage 1 and 2 are often in today's world, are in most countries throughout the world, maybe all, are past stage 1 of the demographic transition and might be in stage 2. And different countries can go through this transition at different rates. China went through the demographic transition very quickly. Other countries may take much longer. Sometimes a country can get stuck at one stage for a period of time. But overall, this pattern has been shown to hold up. Okay. And here we can see, over time, depending, the most developed countries right now have the least population growth because they've reached these industrialized stages of the demographic transition. Other parts of the world, countries are still developing economically and are not quite through that stage yet.